Hi, this is Farley Lewis. Today we're going to do this painting. We're going to talk about atmospheric perspective, how you can capture the illusion of something going back in space. We'll talk a little bit about greens and how to mix greens so that they work in a painting. Sometimes we get them too saturated, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll also talk about foreground and how to add texture. This is a fun painting, so I hope you can paint along. Thanks so much for joining me. Another thing that drew me to this scene was I like the shapes. As we've said, all shapes were not created equal. That's why I go to the gym. I'm still not crazy about some of the shapes I see when I look in the mirror, so I go there. I want different shapes. So here we go. This is kind of a nice tree shape. My standard rule for drawing things in is if I like the shape, I leave it and try to draw it accurately. If I don't like the shape, I try to err on the side of beauty and make it look a little nicer. So, one of the things that I want to be careful of is this distant horizon line could be right in the middle of the picture, and I want to avoid that because it's not a good compositional decision to put something right smack in the middle. Now this horizon line needs to be pretty straight. And this little slice of distant hills is a really important part of the painting. It's just not a very big part of the painting. There's a tree right here that's also a big part of the paint, an important element. And it's not very big either, but I want to get it in there early because it is important. And then there's a bush kind of a thing here, a small tree and a fence row that's actually probably a mile in front of the tree I just drew in. And this fence row cuts back this way. And these different layers, another compositional issue here is I want all of these different layers to be different size shapes. I don't want the exact same shape for any two of them. So here's another bush in the fence row that's fairly close. It looks like it's about 100 yards away. And then the tree behind it is probably close to a mile away. So that tree I just drew in is probably 50 or 60 feet tall, and this tree right here is probably 20 feet tall, but this one's taller just because of the atmospheric, the linear perspective, I should say. I'm drawing this in with transparent red iron oxide. It's kind of my standard drawing color.
And is that the same thing you toned the canvas?
Yep, sure is. Just kind of something, I like it, the transparency of it. And I like that it's warm. So I try to keep my paintings a little on the warm side. Unless it's, obviously it doesn't need to be warm. If it's a snow scene, it may need to be really cold, or there's a lot of other examples for that. But okay, and then there's something back over here. I'm not sure how I'm going to resolve that yet. But that's going to be enough drawing to get us going. Now there's another field in here, and this field has got like yellow flowers kind of coursing through it. And I've kind of drawn the shadow of this tree here. Maybe just a little bit too high.
Oh, I'm so glad the water heater stopped.
Yes. Okay, now this next thing is a ditch. Okay, that's the tree in that fence row right there. And now we've got a ditch that runs kind of close to the fence row back over here. And it comes down, it kind of goes at an angle. And kind of curves back this way. Okay, I think I like that. And that is just about the sum total of the drawing that we need for this. I feel like my distant tree line is going downhill. Just barely. I'm going to try to correct that. We don't want the earth to be tilting in our painting now, do we? Okay, I think I like it.
I guess that could give us a little vertigo feeling.
No kidding. Hate when that happens. Okay, we're going to start with some big areas of dark. And this is where we're going to talk about the green. I'm going to go with almost like a house brush. Let's do this, these close shadows. And they're pretty dark. And I'm using my phthalo blue, my Payne's gray, and then I like to add one of these two reds into my dark mixes. So for this, I'm going to add my quinacridone red for starters. And the red kind of makes the color more dark. And it just gives it a little bit more life than just straight dark blue. So we're going to put this in. And even these background colors, I want to transition them. I'm all the time wanting to transition colors. So now I'm going up along the side and I'm going to switch to my transparent red iron oxide for my mixing color. And that's going to give us a different background color for this. I'm not too worried about putting in all those sky holes yet because I can get around to that later. As I go up, I'm going to start mixing in a little bit of my Viridian green.
Did we mention at the beginning what all the colors are that you're using?
I didn't. I'll go ahead and do it now. I've got from the left to the right, I have titanium white, bismuth yellow, bismuth vandite yellow, cadmium orange, quinacridone red, transparent red iron oxide, phthalo blue, and I use the red shade almost exclusively, cobalt teal, chromium oxide green, Viridian green, Payne's gray, and burnt umber.
And those are all golden open.
Those are all golden open paints, yes. Okay, we're going to get a little bit more of this dark color in here. This is kind of that, it's got more of a little bit more of green in it. I just pulled in some of my oxide green for this because I'm getting this stuff way up high. But I'll be putting some darker color, some highlights over the top of that. And I like to make these brush strokes look good if I can, just because there's a really good chance that some of those colors are going to stay there all the way to the end of the painting. So I won't ever touch some of those areas again. So if I can make it interesting, I'll try to leave those interesting areas and paint new stuff over the top of areas that maybe aren't very interesting. Okay, so I've got that in there. Now as I go back, this next tree is, 40 yards away, something like that. And so I'm not going to grab my darkest colors for it. I'm going to grab the second darkest color. So if this is a value of 9, then this back here is going to be a value of 8. And I'm adding the first bit of my white into it. So it's the story I'm trying to tell in this painting is the step back of on a hazy day. What's the haze do to trees at 40 yards, at 100 yards, at a mile, and at 2 miles, or however those distances are. And then one other shadow color I can add in at this stage is the shadow on the ground. And that's going to be not as dark in this particular instance. Sometimes the shadows are actually darker than the object that makes the shadow. But in this case, it doesn't look like that's the case, so I'm going to put this shadow color in. It's still got, it's still a very cool color. And I'm going to leave a few little spots in there unpainted just because I see some light spots in there. I'm going to come back in and paint in. Okay, I like that. I can use some of these same darks to start a fence row here if I want. Those are going to be easy enough to add later. Okay, so that's what I'm going to end on for those dark colors. I do need to get some darker colors in some of those distant trees. And as I go back, I'm going to keep these getting lighter. So if this color here is a 9 and this color is an 8, then these colors back here might be a 7 or a 7.5 on the value scale.
It's interesting looking at the haze for that very distant tree line. And it makes me think of, I heard somebody talking about in really dry climates, like in Colorado and stuff, it seems unreal sometimes because you don't have that haze of humidity.
Exactly. That's so true. I really like the atmosphere we have in the Midwest. It's just a real nice, it's a fun thing to paint. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to gray this out with just a little bit of white. And that's going to become my color back here, so it's just a little tiny bit different. I mean, honestly, I can't even see the difference, but I kind of paint by faith sometimes. I know that I lightened it, and I lay it in there knowing that it's different than what I've put in there before.
When do you choose white versus like Payne's gray for graying something out?
Well, I'll actually use both of those. But for this particular thing, I'm graying it out and I'm trying to keep it cool. So white is a very cool color. And so I'm using the white to lighten that, but also to keep it cool. If I was going to try to lighten it and keep it warmer, I'd probably lighten it with yellow or orange, or both. So, and then I see something else, a little shadow thing coming up the other bank on this. And I'm going to just stick that in there. No one will probably, good chance that may get painted out, but we'll at least know where those shadows go. Because it looks like the shadows go down and then up this ditch. Okay. While I have those colors fresh, sometimes I like to go ahead and put in the highlight colors for those trees. And I think I'm going to do that now. The highlight greens on this, they're kind of a milky green. They're not a real warm green. Most of the warmer greens are in the ground down here. So this is a pretty cool highlight green. And so I'm going to put these in. I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow because I know it's in the sun and it should be a little bit more green, a little bit more warmer. But now there's another aspect of why I'm using a muted green over here, and that is because we are way up in the top right corner of this painting, and it doesn't even make sense to put real hot, bright colors way up here, in my mind, because it's not where I want your eye to go. So I'm trying to keep the brightest, warmest, most saturated colors in the areas I want your eye to go. So that's one of the big things that we do as artists is we try to direct the eye of the viewer. So as it goes down the tree here, it gets darker. So these highlights are actually getting, where you almost can't see them, but they're still there.
So I suppose a photo editor person would probably want to try and find ways to bring those highlights down.
Yeah, probably.
People to focus more on.
Yeah, probably so. Okay, so these limbs here that are sticking out into the sky, I'm going to paint them in with the knowledge that I may well paint over them whenever I paint the sky in. Because I want these to blend in with the sky. I could even just not even paint them at all and wait until I paint in the sky and then draw those up, into the sky color. As I go down lower on the tree, these are going to get darker because they're getting less light. And I'm conscious of trying to keep things simple. So if I see something starting to look too complicated, I'll back it off or simplify it a little bit more. And I'm going to go back to my darkest color here to kind of further blend what I just did. Going to have to put some negative shapes in that because right now this is not interesting. It's got potential to be interesting, but right now it's just a little on the boring side. So I'm going to go back and put sky holes in that, the spaces in between branches where you can see sky. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do that sky.
So sky holes are considered negative shapes?
Yeah, it's those
Because
spaces.
what's not there.
Right, you're painting in the space between branches where you can look through a tree and see sky behind it. That's what you would call a sky hole. Okay, now we're going to put this sky in, and I'm going to get my palette clean just because I like to have a totally clean palette when I start a sky because you need a lot of paint to do a big sky, and I'm probably going to fill up my whole palette with paint. Sometimes it's a good idea to lay out colors on your palette that not just a single color, but lay out the 2 or 3 colors or 4 colors that you see in the sky and put them all down at once. So for the horizon line sky, I see that it's light and it has more of a teal tone to it. And I actually see just a little tiny bit of red. So I'm going to experiment and see if I can get red in this. And I put it on the side. I don't put it right in the middle and mix it in because then if it's not the right amount or the right color, then I've just spoiled my batch of paint. So I've mixed this up and I like what I'm seeing, so I'm going to probably use that for the horizon line. And then I'm going to use a totally different brush for my next batch of paint here. This is going to be a little bit more blue and it won't have that red piece in it. I see just a little hint of green, so I'm going to mix in a little bit of yellow to turn that kind of greenish. And that's going to be our second color going up. And that's a fairly narrow band of color that I see. So I'm going to get yet another brush. I like to wet my brush down before I stick it in paint. So this is going to be bluer still. This is the first time I'm grabbing my phthalo blue. And I'm going to put some of the teal color in it. So that's my third color. I think I'm going to do one more color. It's a good thing I've got a lot of these number 8 brushes here because I'm using a lot of them. This is our last and darkest color. And I'm going to let this go back toward purple just a little bit. Okay, got 4 colors. I could either start at the top or the bottom. I think I'm going to start at the bottom, the horizon line, with this lightest color here. And when I put it down, I have to resist the urge to mix it darker because my first brush stroke tells me, oh, that's just white. But I know it's not white because I just mixed it. So I kind of have to, again, I kind of paint by faith. I'm painting, I'm using this color. I'm trusting my, my color mixing already. So I'm not second guessing myself thinking, oh, I don't have the right color. I'm trying to make space for those treetops. Okay. That's the first color. Now we're going to do this second color. One of the secrets of getting a good blend is having plenty of paint there to blend. If you're starving your palette and you're not putting very much paint out there, when I say starving your palette, it just means you're not keeping enough paint on your palette to do what you got to do. So if you're doing that, if you're not putting enough paint down, especially on your canvas, it's going to be hard for you to get a decent blend because you just don't have enough paint out there to do it. Switch back to this other brush, and I feel like I need some texture in this, so I'm going to see if I can grab a little thicker amount of paint and see if I can lay that in thick enough where I can get some texture going. When I say texture, I'm really talking paint thickness, impasto. It's not very easy to get with Golden Open. I love Golden Open, but I have to, generally I switch to the heavy body acrylics whenever I want to get impasto, the texture in the paint. Okay, so I'm going to go up to the next level of color here, this blue that has both the teal and the phthalo blue in it. And I'm not overly worried about the edge on this tree because I'm going to go back and do that later. So I'm just kind of blocking that in sort of rough. And then once I start blending this, I keep my brush the same way. I don't flip the brush over. I got to keep it this way so that the lighter color is on the bottom of the brush and the darker color is on the top of the brush. That helps me blend. I want to avoid the look of stripes in the sky. So, and I kind of see something like that right here. And the other thing I try to avoid is I don't want this sky to be too perfect because nothing else in this painting is going to look very perfect. I don't need a perfect looking sky with no brush strokes or anything like that. So I want a little bit of stroke in this, a little bit of brush action, if you will. Okay, now the darkest blue is going up here. You know what? I think I'm going to do this different. I'm going to put that color over here because the sun is coming from this way. And I'm going to...
there's some color transition from left to right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so over here I'm actually going to use this teal color and darkening it just a little bit more. So it's the same value as the other color, but it's warmer. It's got more of that teal color, which has got a little bit more yellow in it. And that's going to keep this side of the painting of the sky warmer.
I'm assuming in your mural work you've done some color transitions of skies.
Oh yeah, yes.
Is it easier or harder in a mural versus a small?
I don't know that there's a big difference. With a mural, I might be doing this with a roller.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How do you keep from having the banding, the stripes?
Well, same way that I do here. I just flip my brush over, which I said you shouldn't do. But the banding, you just blend it out with the brush. You know, like if I was rolling it out, if I was doing a sky like this, I would I might block it in with, rollers, but I would do the final blending with the brush probably.
Okay.
Okay.
So like a big old house painting brush?
Yeah, 2.5, 3-inch brush.
We gotta do some videos of that.
I'm telling you. Okay, I kind of like that sky.
Since we've been doing these videos for a while, I'm seeing other paintings in totally different ways.
Oh, really?
I'm starting to see the brushwork and the transition of color and the depth and things that just I wouldn't have been able to point out the structure of it before.
Really? Well, that's
I
cool.
would have just looked at it and went, hey, I kind of like that, or no, I don't really like that. But I wouldn't know why.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can go to a restaurant and eat a good meal, and I can get up and say, that was a great meal, but I can't really tell you why, probably. But a chef could. He could say, well, the layers of seasoning in the steak was blah, blah, blah. The way I paired that with the asparagus was that, acidic and the whatever. He would have he would understand why it tastes good because he's a chef. Mm-hmm. As an artist, it's good to know what's beautiful. We all have a sense of what's pretty, what we like, and everybody kind of has different tastes in that. But what we don't often know is why it's beautiful. That's the artist's job. Because if I understand why something is beautiful, I can depict it. So why something is beautiful has to do with shapes and values and all the things that we talk about. Now there's sky holes in there, but I hesitate to put them in now because that paint's still wet enough that if I try to do it now, it's going to blend too much. But I will do a little bit of it because I want a little bit of blending. And then I can come back and darken these just a little, or lighten, I should say. I try to see the sky holes that are there. I find it's kind of hard to make up convincing sky holes. You'd think it'd be easy. I mean, they're just little blobs of light paint. But if I just look real carefully at what I'm painting, I'm trying to put the brush strokes in that I'm seeing, but that just makes for much more convincing sky holes.
I'm always amazed when I see you put in the sky holes because just the dramatic change it has.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you cut holes through trees.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, isn't it? And sky holes can also help determine the shape of the tree and what's actually happening in all those branches. Like these right here tell us, I'm going to put some of this in. This one right here is telling us that the branches go down. That's what these sky holes are doing. So, and I want to make sure that my sky holes don't extend down below the horizon line because then they're not sky holes, they're ground holes, I guess,
Great point, yeah. That one got pretty close.
Yeah, it did. And I may need to change it, but I think it's okay. And then it's important when I'm doing sky holes to stop and look at the big picture sometimes because I can get carried away and I can be doing stuff without looking at the whole. I want to look at this. As I'm painting this, I want to be glancing at the whole scene so that I'm doing something that's working for everything on the canvas and not just that one little sky hole. And the closer I get to being done with something, I slow down and make sure I'm not doing too much, that kind of thing. Okay, I could go back and soften the edges on the trees just a little bit. That's going to help us. This kind of thing here is edge work. I'm just softening these edges. I want a variety of edges, and I want the overall look to be fairly soft. Because that's what I see in the reference photo, and it's also what I know from experience that trees tend to have pretty soft edges. Most edges are softer than we think they are. There's an appearance to these edges that we're trying to get that, yeah. I need to use the right color blue as I work up here. Okay. One last edge I'm going to soften a little bit more is that far edge way over here. Looks like I got the wrong color there. That is what you would call a lost edge. It's so soft, it's almost completely lost. And I like to do those kind of edges. Sometimes they're close to the edge of the edge of the panel, so that your eye kind of stays inside the painting. Okay, so now I'm going to do that distant tree line, and I can use some of these same colors that I've used in my sky and maybe just add a little tiny bit of another color. So what I think I can do on this, I can probably add this transparent red iron oxide into these colors, the sky blue color, and I'm mixing the teal, the phthalo blue, and the transparent red iron oxide. Those are the three primary colors I'm using for this distant hillside, distant tree line. And I'm trying to get this distant light blue tree line, and this is a really important color because it's telling the story. The story we're trying to communicate here is the distance on a hazy day in Arkansas. So trying to find that color blue, and I'm going to take my time and mix until I like it. There's been times whenever I spend 10, 15, 20 minutes mixing a color. But to me, it's important. I want to get the right color. Feels too green to me, believe it or not, so I'm trying to make it a little bit less green. And it might even be barely too dark. I think that's what the color I want right there. Now, once I have the color, I'm tempted to remix that same color and just do it with 0 water in my brush so that I can actually get a thickness to the paint. So I'm going to try to mix that same color and not do any water at all in it, so it's just pure paint, and I can kind of put it on thick and it'll have a little bit more interest to it. Okay, that's just a little bit thicker. It's another time when you have to talk to yourself and trust the color that you mixed, because this appears completely blue, like there's just absolutely no green at all in it. And your brain again tells you, hey, those are trees back there, they got to be green. And it's that little voice that keeps us from doing better paintings, because we really have to trust our mixing and believe that these colors are going to be right when the whole thing gets done. Now, reality is this may not be the right color. I may end up going back and changing it, but for now it's what I see there, so I'm putting it in. And I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this far side over here. The reason for that is I believe this chunk of tree line is farther away than that, because I think it's kind of going back at an angle. So just a little bit of that color over there somewhere too. Okay, one other thing about atmospheric pressure, perspective is edges get softer as they go off in the distance. So I'm going to soften this distant edge just a little bit. That's going to help give it the illusion of depth.
Notice that sometimes you soften with your fingertips and sometimes you use a brush.
Well, I was using a brush there because my finger's too fat.
Gotcha.
I couldn't do it any other way. So on this this next row of trees, that row of trees there, I'm guessing is probably a mile and a half, 2 miles away. This next tree is probably less than a mile away. It's probably half to 2/3 of a mile. That's these trees right here. So the shadow side of this tree is just going to be dark blue. About like that. And I can even use some of that same dark blue down here for smaller brush or trees or whatever, like it's on the same fence row. So I do see another bush down there. And this one here. So I'm going to do that the sunny side of those distant trees, and this is the color that's actually going to make that whole tree read like a green tree, because it's just got this little bit of green in it. And it's barely green, it's not very green, but it's just green enough to give it the sense that, hey, that's a tree and not a, pile of blue something. Okay, so this is the sunny side of the tree, and boy, you just can't even hardly see the difference. But again, I'm trusting my paint mixing that there really is a difference here. And then it's probably going to be a good thing to soften those edges just a little bit. Basically, I just added yellow into the same mix to get that greener side of the tree. Yeah. All of those things, they're just little, they seem picky, they seem like they're not going to show in the end, but they really do show in the end. And I'll be glad that they're there. So I'm gonna make the next green more saturated, brighter, more yellow, more the green color. And this is going to be the green on these trees here that are however far these are, maybe 100 yards away.
Have you decided if you're keeping the telephone pole?
I haven't. That's a good question, Joe. I am wondering about that.
I've noticed those types of details you seem to decide right near the end.
Yeah, it is kind of a question of, does the painting need it? Some people don't like telephone poles. I kind of like them. I think they're part of the typical landscape today. There are things in typical landscapes today that I don't particularly like, and I will leave those out. Things like jet trails in the sky. It's an awful lot of skies you see have a jet trail in them. And I'm not real crazy about that, so I'll probably leave most of those out. In fact, I don't ever remember painting a jet trail in a painting. I think I can use this very same green for this. This tree has some wild limbs sticking out to the left, and kind of like it, and it's going to keep my tree from being too perfect. I don't want to overblend the tree. Right now there's zero blending in it. I'm not concerned about that because I'm going to go back and right now and add a kind of an in-between green that will kind of help blend these two a little bit. There's a tree farther away back here, and probably several trees. And I'm going to get this fence row in here too. This is right on the edge of the painting again, so I don't feel need to give it a lot of detail, a lot of definition. It just needs to read as foliage over there, I'm just going to soften those edges. Okay, well that tree's not done, but it's getting there. It needs a few little dark spots over on this side of it. And one last thing, it could use a softer edge. Okay, so here's that tree. Now we're going to put in the next field, which is pretty green. This distant field back here. And it's got a little bit more of a blue-green cast to it than those trees. Keeping your greens distinctly different for different portions of the painting, I think, is a nice thing to do. This is going to be that distant tree, distant field, excuse me. And for some of that field poking through that tree, I'm going to put those in there. Now the field that's the most distant portion of that field, the field that's in the foreground that I'm painting right now is, like I said, 75 to 100 yards away. But the field, the same field on the far end of it is probably closer to, half a mile or a mile away. So I want to paint them just slightly different. And then as I get over here, I'm going to switch to that slightly different so that I can add that sense of distance in there before I get to the tree. Okay, so now I'm going to mix in this blue color, make it bluer and lighter, because that's one of the rules of atmospheric perspective. Is two of the rules. One is things in the distance go lighter, and another rule is things in the distance go cooler. So this field is going to get cooler and lighter as it goes back. That means I'm adding white and blue. White will make it lighter and the blue makes it cooler. Both of those actually make it cooler. But I'm noticing as I do this that it's not separating from the thing, from the background tree line. So I'm backing off just a little bit. I've got to get those to be separate. Okay, now we're ready for that yellow field. And I am going to pause and clean my palette again.
noticing as you're putting in those different layers of color, the distances, you're not too concerned with the toning of the canvas coming through in certain spots.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think some of those will end up staying?
They definitely will. It's those little flecks of warm color that makes the whole painting feel warm. Okay, so now for a field of orange flowers. Another kind of general rule of thumb is I try to use the biggest brush I can get away with. And in this case, it's my number 8, the big brush that I was using for the sky. So I'm going to start this with yellow and orange. And there is green in this too, and that's going to soften that orange. So it's going to gray it out just a little bit because I don't want a circus orange. I want a field orange. Okay, so that's an orange color. I think it's more orange than I want. I think I need to go more yellow because I think the flowers, as I mix up that color, they're probably more yellow than they are orange. So let's try this. Notice I just mixed a new color next to the old color. I didn't try to totally change that color. Why not just have 2 colors on your palette? So I've got that out there now. I'm adding white to it. Now I can pull some more of that orange color in to see what I like. So I think I like that color. And another nice thing about kind of how I've done this is I've actually got, well, I just added some green here. So now I've got 3 distinct colors, 1, 2, 3, that I can make this single field out of. So there's the yellowish color, here's the orangish color, and here's the green color. Painters have called that broken color. So it's one field that I've painted in 3 or 4 different colors. Just adds interest to it. And I resist the urge to smooth all that out and make it nice and perfect. I don't need to make everything perfect. It doesn't really help in the long run. So now I'm going to mix up my closest yellow color. Green color, I mean, it's not quite the closest, second to the closest. It's the this right here, this side of the ditch, or the far side of the ditch, I should say. So we're going to mix that up, and that's kind of a yellowish green color. I put white out there, but I probably don't need that much white. That's pretty close. And that's going to be the kind of the weeds here. Now the way the shadow comes down the hill defines the curvature of the hill. So I'm taking my time and trying to get that shadow the right curve, and then I'm also softening it because the edge of a shadow, if it's real close to the source, it's sometimes hard, but when it gets that far away, it's getting softer and softer. Plus it's a whole bunch of weeds out in the field, so that's going to soften that shadow. Okay, now I'm going to do the same kind of broken color thing I did over at the other in this other field. And I could even get some of this other orangey color, like there's a handful of flowers over in this chunk of ground also.
What's the difference between broken color and transitioning color?
Well, this is a color that transitions. This is broken color in the sense that it's just a stroke of that color, a stroke of that color, and a stroke of that color. These colors don't really transition. There's just different colors in this field. It kind of does from light to dark. So I guess you could say that it does a little bit of both.
It's not a smooth transition.
It's not a smooth transition. Yeah, that's probably a good way to say it.
Okay.
And I'm going to get some. I'm just reaching for pure yellow right here, just because this is right in the middle of my focal area, and I want to get this kind of amped up just a little bit more. I'm going to add some of my transparent red iron oxide. Again, this is just to get a different color of green. And then as I get over here on the side, I'm going to also darken it so that your eye kind of tends to move toward the middle of the painting. And there actually is dark over here. I just noticed this tree shadow right here.
Sure.
How did we not see that, Joe? You didn't tell me that there was a tree shadow right there.
My eye is not quite as trained yet, I suppose.
I need a little bit of this color here to show that the shadow is just right there. In the bottom of this ditch, the shadows deepen just a little bit. All right, now we've got the closer side of this hill. I've got a color already in the tone of the canvas that I kind of like. So I want to, as I paint this foreground, a couple things that are going through my mind. As we paint this foreground, number one, we want to leave areas unpainted. So in this area right here, some of this we can just not even paint at all probably. The second thing is we want to add plenty of texture in here because this is a real close, this is, if this is a mile away and this is 50 yards away, well this is 10 feet away. So at 10 feet we can actually see individual weeds. Now not that I want to paint all those individual weeds, but I want to indicate those weeds. So the way we can indicate them is with texture. Because texture reads like detail. So right now I'm doing stuff on this edge here that it's the idea is that I'm just doing something that is communicating like there's a whole bunch happening here, but really I'm not painting in individual limbs or in blades of grass, anything like that. I'm just making texture with my brush. And that will communicate like detail. And then there's a bright green in here. It goes darker down in the corner.
And that communicating or suggesting or giving the impression of is what the Impressionists were all about.
Exactly. And it's important for me not to overthink this process. So I could fixate on some little tiny area, some brushstroke I just painted. I do not want to do that. So instead of doing that, I kind of speed up the painting process, move a little quicker, have fun. I just don't want to worry about individual strokes here. I just want to try to get the look that I'm after with, any means possible, I suppose. And I'm conscious that I want to get plenty of variety in this. So I'm switching up colors. I'm kind of making snap decisions on what I grab. And all of that's just kind of to keep this thing free and loose and not over thought out and chalk with individual leaves or whatever. Now I'm noticing something here, Joe, that this side of the ditch doesn't look like the same field as this side of the ditch. So I've got to get a little bit more of that green in here to match that side of the ditch. So we don't have two things that don't go together, because this kind of needs to read as one field. That's kind of where I'm going now with it.
So you're pulling the two fields together.
Yeah, just trying to make that feel like it's all one field. There, that helps, didn't it? That kind of makes it feel like it's all sort of,
Yeah, those last couple of strokes in the foreground helps too.
Uh-huh. And I want to see if I can leave this corner unpainted just for fun. Okay, I think I can leave that as is. The other thing is I want to flick some paint on there. I see a lot of little white flowers, that may be Queen Anne's lace or something like that. I'm going to kind of just see if I can get some of that in there. Try not to get it up into the area above there very much.
The tricks of the trade. Notice you're not using your little toothbrush.
No, sometimes I just like to use this brush or another brush. I like to get different color of spray, and then I like to wipe a little bit of it out so that some of it is kind of smeared and some of it's left alone. And again, the idea is I'm just adding texture. Now, the one other thing that I don't have in this foreground is little shots of dark. And I want to get some areas in there that are real dark. Just like there's something growing up there. There's something that's kind of just the shadow of the ditch there poking through that bush. And this is straight burnt umber. I like to try to do stuff that it's hard to figure out how I did it. You know, if I look back in a year and see this foreground, it'd be kind of fun for me to say, you know, I can't even tell what I did there. Now I'm going to get just a little bit of this grass, kind of just the barest amount of detail kind of poking up into the shadow area. Something I notice here is this field kind of squares off into that tree, which I don't like, so I'm going to adjust that end. Okay, so I can go back and add in a little bit hotter highlights into my foreground trees. And I can deepen the shadows. I'm just looking at the painting and I'm seeing the things that I feel like need to change. And here's another thing is the way this tree bumps into the ground is awkward. It doesn't feel natural yet, so I'm just going to go back and naturalize it, I suppose. Because I see some of those real dark greens or real dark colors that are not even green. I haven't filled in those spots either yet, but I want to get some of those darks. I see them all the way down to here. So I'm going to put those in like that. Well, I'm softening the edge of that shadow. As you get close to the edge, sometimes the one place you see the true color, I guess the local color of a thing, is right at the edge of the sunny and the shadow area. So like right along that edge, sometimes you'll have that really bright green grass because everywhere else it's either in shadow or it's washed out by sunlight. So I'm going to try to get some real bright green right in there at the edge of that. And I'm just seeing some sky holes that need a little help. Here's a place for detail. So I've got these sky holes and I can put some branches running through them. Like that. It doesn't take much of that to communicate there's a tree with branches running up through there. Kind of get the feeling of there's just this tangle of branches in there. And occasionally there's a chunk of leaves that you can see kind of sticking out there. What I want to do with that, with some of those leaves sticking out into the sky, is I want to mix up that sky color or just a blue and kind of a light blue-green, because really what you're seeing is the sky and the leaf. You know, it's kind of the sky's wrapping around that leaf, kind of. So you get those two colors mixed. There's just some flecks of light poking in this tree in different places. And then some of this down here, which I haven't painted yet. I'm going to leave some of that background color showing through in there. And then one of the last things I like to do on a painting is I like to look for areas to put in really bright color. So one of the areas I could see is I could double coat this area of yellow here, orangey yellow, and I'm ramping it up just another notch. And I didn't mix this well, so I've got a lot of different colors in my brush right now. And then probably need to soften that edge between the field and the shadow in the foreground. And one of the ways we soften an edge is to just break it up. It's kind of like that. I'm going to put a really ambitious weed in here that goes all the way up. Probably poison ivy. It seems like they always grow the best, don't they? I don't get
That and hemlock.
Yeah. What's up with that?
Well, they're hardy.
Yeah. Okay, well, as I look at this, I notice that these four trees are all very similar in size and shape. So, it's a compositional oops, if you will, and it's fairly easy to correct. So I'm going to make this tree wider, which it is. This bush here needs a different shape too, so it doesn't match those trees in the background. I'm kind of revamping these two trees because they're easier to fix. Those two trees I would have to try to match that color I did back there, and I don't really want to do that. So for this, I think it just needs something down here. Okay, I like it. And then this fence row. Well, you don't have to do much to make a convincing fence row. In fact, I'll do a fence row right now. I'm going to use my maul stick for this. That may be all we need for fences there, and then put just a couple little things that maybe look like fence rows back here. Okay, I see one other thing that needs attention, and that is this sky. This is a dangerous thing to try to fix because it's a real light color that's not very easy to mix again. But I'm going to try it because I see some stuff in the sky that I don't like. I don't know, it's just kind of brush strokes that didn't, I just don't like the look of them. So I am going to attempt to remedy that. Wish me luck, Joe.
I am wishing you the best of luck.
Okay, here we go. This is going to seem drastic when I put this down. And to smooth out the top of that, I'm going to try the rag approach. I haven't put that fence post in yet, Joe. Not sure I need it.
You mean the telephone pole?
I mean the telephone pole. I said fence pole. Thank you.
You know, something about when you put in the fence line,
Yeah?
fence row,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it also, to me, says that's the reason why that field looks so much different from the other field, because they would be getting different care on each side of the fence. That makes any
Interesting.
sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when you're driving through the country, you just see that every paddock looks different from every other,
Yeah.
because some of them have been grazed and some of them haven't, and some of them are growing different things than others.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to call it done for the first of 3 times. So, you know how this works.
Third time is the charm.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the fourth.
Sometimes the 4th.
That distant color ended up working.
Yeah, we didn't have to redo that.
And if you'd let your mind convince you too much green in that distance, it wouldn't have sold it.
Right. Yeah, it has to stay pretty blue to make it work. I see something else that's kind of fun. And just because it's my painting and you can't stop me, I'm going to try to put in a distant barn back there.
All right.
Yeah. It's my party and I can cry if I want to, right? So if it doesn't work.
Then you'll be crying. You'll be painting it back up.
Yeah, right. It's kind of just a little piece of detail and people can wonder what the heck it is. A little tiny speck of white there. Yeah, not very noticeable, but I like it. Okay, I'm calling it done for the 2nd time.
And now is where we step up and go all the way across the room and stare at it.
And see all the other things that need to be fixed. I already see one thing.
What's that?
The bottom right corner. Okay, there's 2 things, 2 more things I see. Broken up a little bit more like that. And this back here needs a darker something in here. Kind of wishing this wasn't such a harsh stop on this side of that field.
Also makes your focus area tighter.
Yeah. And then I could give this distant field some highlight. This field here needs a little bit of those yellow flowers in it that I have here. and it'll kind of it helps the color harmony, I guess I'm trying to say.
Color harmony.
Yeah, the idea is that if you use a color in only one place in the whole painting, sometimes it works, you know, like if you have a red barn, there's no red anywhere else. But sometimes it's a good idea to get some of that color in some other places in the painting. So, like some painters, if they mix up a color and they put it, this orange color right here, they'll look for one or two other places elsewhere in the painting to put that same color. And that just kind of helps with the overall harmony of the painting. I actually do that sometimes. Not religiously, but try not to do anything religiously. See, that's that orangey color. So that and that, so it kind of helps tie that color into the whole. And I kind of am wishing there was a streak of sunlight right through here. I don't have that in the picture, but it'd sure be fun if there was just some little patch of sun. What was what?
The last thing you showed.
Well, it was the shadow color. I was fixing my clumsy stroke.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes the clumsy stroke is a blessing. Sometimes my clumsy strokes turn out better than my careful strokes. And one more bright highlight thing that I can put in. I don't think anything else I'm doing is helping. I think I'm going to stop.
Is that done number 2 or 3?
I think that's done number 4, actually.
Oh, is it?
I haven't signed my name to this. Should I sign my name?
Yeah.
Let's just go ahead and sign this baby while we're pedaling.
How do you decide where you're going to sign?
Well, it's usually bottom left or bottom right, and this tends toward a bottom left signature just because there's a little more space available. I just kind of need a blank, semi-blank area to put it in. Trying to make sure my signature kind of fits into the style of the rest of the painting. Things are kind of broken up in the painting, so my signature is kind of that way.
Have you always had the same signature, or has it evolved?
No, it's evolved, but I haven't changed it much over the last year or two. One time I signed just my first name, and I never did change it. I just left it that way. But the more I looked at it, I thought, I like my first name, but I also like my last name. So after that, I just painted both of them on there. And I like to be able to read them. Some people sign a name where you can't read them, and that's totally fine too. Well, that was fun. Really glad you joined me for this. Today we looked at painting atmospheric perspective, how to create the illusion of something going back in the distance. And we looked at mixing greens, different types of greens for different situations. And also we looked at foreground, how to add texture into a foreground to make it look like it's kind of give the illusion of detail. Really glad you joined me for this. Thanks so much. Well, Joe and I started comparing, and we noticed that this painting on my left and your right was one I did a few days ago from the exact same stretch of highway. And these two paintings go together, and this is actually what I saw. So, just two sides of one tree line. But so if you're curious about what it looked like to the left of the painting we just did, that's what it looked like.
That's pretty cool.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us.